Hello and welcome to yet another episode of my 2023 World Cup preview series. We move on to Pool D today, and I kick it off by looking at Ireland's visitors to Dublin this weekend, England. Steve Borthwick may have been given little wiggle room in this World Cup cycle, but the pressure is still on for the former Saracens captain to deliver. Joining me tonight, further debutants, and in a late change to some proceedings, my original guest was called into work, so we've decided to call upon his father, who's not a bad man to bring on, I must say. So it's a pleasure to introduce commentator and host of the Rugby Inheritance podcast, Sam Roberts. Welcome on, Sam.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I was just pleased that you knew who I was. That's very good. Yes, apologies about young William not being able to be here, but it's always good to be a second choice. I don't mind. I'll take that, Catelyn. I'll take that.
No worries. And I usually start by asking about the World Cup. I'm going to change things differently because I mentioned the Rugby Inheritance pod, which you do with Ed Slater, and a lot of people, both sides of the Irish Sea, are absolutely love it. So for those who aren't familiar, would you mind just taking us through the story of how that podcast came about and Ed and so on, and the brilliant guests you've had on as well?
Yeah, that's very good of you to give me a platform and to talk about it. It's quite fortuitous in a sense. I work with Ed Slater on the Gloucester official Gloucester podcast many years ago. We started doing that did that for about 3 or 4 seasons. I grew quite a good friendship with him. Another chap called Mark Atkinson alongside him as well, and then obviously what happened, and if there's any listeners who aren't aware, Ed Slater unfortunately had the diagnosis last summer of having contracted MND, and he is obviously looking at that with some trepidation and trying to come to terms with it, and has done, I suppose, over the last year in a big way. And I reached out to him. First and foremost, I reached out to him to obviously offer my thoughts and best wishes. But then I got in contact with him because I wanted to know how I could sort of do my bit or use the skills in inverted commas that I have to try and help him. Because the rugby community got around him in a huge way. It was absolutely incredible. You know, a huge amount of money was raised for him and his family to help. The hashtag for Ed cause was big on social media, and it still is. A lot of people, including those at Gloucester and Leicester Tigers, were behind him, and it was wonderful to see. Really, really incredible to see. But I want to know whether or not I could do something. And actually, I got the chance to sort of pitch to him. I spoke to him, and we had a catch up and a chat. And I said, look, do you want to talk about rugby? And he said, I really miss talking about rugby. I speak a lot over the last few months about MND, and I've been seen to be a little bit of a spokesperson for that fight and for that cause, and trying to educate people and trying to sort of get the whole profile raised. But I miss talking about rugby. And I said, I think we can do both. I think we can do a little bit of, raising the profile of your cause and the fight against MND, but I think mostly we can talk about rugby. And so that was the first bit of the jigsaw puzzle. And so that kind of came together, and we decided on a name and came up with the idea of trying to get some names from the rugby community who would perhaps towards the end, we did say, do we want people currently in the game? Well, maybe not. We want people towards the end of their career, and people potentially who have retired, who are looking back and working out what their inheritance is from rugby. This game is extraordinary, and you will have an inheritance from the game. You will have something that the game has given you, and it is something that is the same wherever you go, whoever you are, whether you play for the Vets, whether you play for England, whether you play for anyone in between. Rugby gives you something, and I wanted to examine that idea, examine that thought, and I wanted to do that alongside Ed. And luckily, we've had some incredible names come on the podcast and talk about what they feel rugby has given them. And it's some fantastic listening. We're slightly hamstrung a little sometimes by technical difficulties because we don't have a studio, we don't have any producers, we don't have money behind us. It is literally me on Zoom with Ed, with our guests. Sometimes it's difficult to get the quality, but the message is fantastic. It's varied. There are some themes in it, recurring themes in it, but the message is absolutely fantastic. And it has been a hell of a ride. I don't know how long it goes on for. Ed's condition means that his voice is starting to get affected, but we're also trying to raise a bit of money. We ask each guest to come on and give us a bit of a gift, a memento, a piece of memorabilia from their career, and they leave it behind. We're going to do an auction as well, and I'm sure there's going to be people to want to get involved in that. We have had some big names: Chris Ashton, Paul O'Connell, Jean de Villiers, to name but a few. There's lots on there, and they've all been absolutely fascinating. So a pleasure to be involved in it, an absolute journey. And something I'm very, very proud of.
And it's credit to you. It's a brilliant podcast. I will link it down below for everyone to check it out. And if they do want to donate as well, the power of the rugby community is, as you said, if they do, because it's a great cause. And we'll move on to the World Cup now. So thanks for that, Sam. And James Pockney also joins us as well. And we'll start with yourself, James. Are you excited for the World Cup coming up?
Yeah, I can't wait for it. Yeah, I'm really excited. Yeah, I think it's one of the most open World Cups probably in the history of the professional game at the moment. I think, because I think the previous times, well, particularly in the last World Cup, like you kind of had a feeling England would get to the final, and the one before, you had a feeling that New Zealand would be right up there. Whereas this time it could be anyone. Like, and then on the tough side of the draw, I'm on the quote unquote tough side of the draw. I think it depends. I think on what cost do they beat each other. Yeah,
and Sam, you went along the same lines as well before we started recording. It is wide open. Does that help fuel your excitement?
Oh, it's difficult not to be excited about any Rugby World Cup, but this one is particularly tantalising. I mean, we spoke earlier about the fact that obviously seeding or creating the draw for the World Cup 3 years ago has come potentially to bite the Rugby World Cup in the bottom a little bit, because it seems to me, looking at the draw, that some of the best games could be a couple of quarterfinals and a potential semi-final on one side of the game, on one side of the draw. And to have that amount of quality stacked on one side is going to be interesting. That said, they're always a journey. There's always a surprise. There's always somebody who beats somebody who shouldn't. I can't quite work out who that's going to be at the moment in time. I said to you earlier, if I did know, I'd be down the bookies and I'd be pretty rich. But you look at some of the individual teams that are currently in, or the form that they're currently in at the moment, and it's very interesting. And particularly, and we talked a little bit. I'll repeat myself to you, Callum, but the obvious ones perhaps are teams like Fiji, where people are already openly talking about just what sort of good form a team like Fiji are in. But we know that Fiji have the potential, certainly, to do that. I'm looking at the slightly lower, or sort of lower tiered teams like your Uruguays, your Georgias, potentially the teams that have genuine opportunity, if things go right for them, to give a big name a bloody nose. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see where that comes from.
It is, and it's set up to be that way, isn't it? Because you got the likes of Tonga against Scotland, for instance, Fiji against Wales, and I'm not just picking on those two teams, but they're the types of games that leap off the page. Samoa against England, Argentina as well, and it's like we're here to talk about England. That's the flavor of the week now this week, and I suppose I'll start with yourself. I'll throw this one to yourself, James. Like Eddie Jones got a lot of airtime, and probably too much, some might say, but we kind of do need to talk about him within the realms of the fact that he was let go last year. He was replaced by Steve Borthwick, a former apprentice of his. So very early in the day, we're still only 8 games into the Steve Borthwick era. What would you say about the switch so far, or is this kind of, we'll judge him in a couple of years' time?
I think, yeah, I don't think it's been great for the start, but I think considering the season in England, like with 3 top flight clubs going under, I think maybe he kind of decided to stick with his current crop and said like he wanted them to own it, and then maybe after the World Cup, it'll be a new transition, so he'll bring like new players in after, because they won't be, because I think maybe he doesn't want to scar the next generation and put them off, whereas some of this generation, this will be like some of their last games in England, so probably. So yeah, I think we'll see in a few years. See where Steve Borthwick goes. Yeah, definitely.
Sam, have you Anthony, you want to add? And I
Yeah.
acknowledge that you're in the game and all that, so you know, if you feel like your hands are tied, just say at any point. But
No,
the switch in general.
No,
would
my
you
hands are not tied at all. I wrote a piece today, which is up on Rugby Pass, which a few people have tethered themselves to, which reveals some really interesting data. I know Steve Borthwick loves data, but actually, and it, you talked about Eddie Jones there, and actually links back into a guest we had on the Rugby Inheritance podcast, a guy called Stuart Lancaster. Now, he capped back in 2012. He capped a whole host of players who are now currently still playing for England. Your Owen Farrells, your George Fords, your Anthony Watsons, your Billy Vunipolas, your Joe Marlers, those guys. And just before he took over in 2012, Ben Youngs, Manitou Alangi, Dan Cole were all capped. Courtney Laws was capped back in 2009, believe it or not. There's a huge tranche of players who were capped in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. If you add in the likes of Henry Slate, I know he's not playing, but there's a whole group of players that Joe Launchbury, that sort of spine, massive amount of players. Now, when we had Stuart Lancaster on the podcast, he talked about the fact that actually 2015 was his ignominy, his disaster. It's what he will always be known for. But he wasn't building that England side for 2015. He was building it for 2019 because he realized that having capped them and started them at 2012, he reckoned and had done, and again, listen to the man himself, an incredible insight. He talks about the fact that if they kept faith with them, that group of players, if they continued to play them, that by the time that they were getting to 2019, bearing in mind that extra bit of information. In 2012, his first game against Scotland, he played a 15 or a side that had 220 international caps. That's how many they had in the starting lineup, 220. That's not very many.
Very little.
Now, and you then look at the teams that are doing exceptionally well. You have 600, 700, 800 caps in a side that's doing very well. And he'd worked out that by 2019, that side, if you stuck with them, if you kept capping those players, they would be, by 2019, their trajectory would be, believe it or not, 600, 700, 800 caps, depending on how well they've done. And lo and behold, that was their point at which they were going to hit their fulcrum. Their peak was 2019. And so it came out that game against, in Yokohama in New Zealand was England at their very best, beating the All Blacks. Yes, okay, it didn't work out in the final against South Africa for whatever reason, but England were effectively, let's call it, I don't want to upset any South African listeners, the best side in the world that night. They were incredible. And all of those players were in that point. At 2019, when Eddie, and this is a long answer, I'm terribly sorry, Eddie Jones came in, and of course, these problems happen because of various different relationships and situations. Eddie Jones came in, and when he sort of took them all the way to 2019, he then got an extra bit. And because of Eddie Jones's personality, he wanted to prove people wrong. That was his moment, and that was his greatest moment as well. And he'd been cruelly denied, and he kept people. And he, unlike Lancaster, when Eddie Jones after 2019, he was capping people, but he wasn't holding on to them. He wasn't trusting them. He capped loads of people, Eddie Jones, but he kept on returning to combinations, tried and trusted combinations in that England side. And let's face it, he's not in the position to answer this fully. But I reckon if he'd got to this World Cup, he would be playing, his first 15 would look a lot like the first 15 that played in the 2019 World Cup final. Because he was playing to right a wrong that he wanted to do. And the best way that he needed to do that was to play these people. But 2019 should have been the beginning and the end for so many different players. Now, the reason I bring this up, and the reason why the internet and the wonderful world of Twitter has helped, a chap has marked on a graph the cap levels of the players that played in that game against Wales. Now, there is a whole tranche, as we mentioned, of players that were capped in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, even 2015. Then there's a gap in the graph. And there's a load of players that are then capped at 2019, 2020, 2021. There are very few England players that were capped around the 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018 mark. And if they'd held on to those players, they would all be of an ilk and an understanding of the game and an experience within the game, and lo and behold, they would be about 25, 26, 27, 28 years old. And a really key example of that type of player is Ben Earl. Now, Ben Earl has been brilliant since 2019. You can go back and find Twitter sort of mentions for Ben Earl in 2019, 2020, saying that he is one of the best players in English rugby by a long, long way at the moment. And that's in 2020. Saturday was his first start for England. And that is where England's problem, I think, lies. That for whatever reason, Eddie Jones has not allowed that tranche of players, 40, 50 cappers who should be, 30, 40, 50 cappers who should be, that group of players to dominate this squad, who, bizarrely, would be in an amazing place in 2027. Do you see what I mean? Do you see my through line?
Short-termism comes to mind,
and I think that's it. And I know that's a very long-winded. I'm sorry about that answer,
no,
but I hope that that's what I think England's problem is.
No, it's a very fair point. And like, we could talk about the squad. We will get into the squad a little bit more later on. You could talk about the Premiership. You could talk about Eddie Jones, but there's a lot of moving parts. But that's one good reason as well. If you stop bringing through players for a period, you will reach a point. And it happens to club sides the whole time. Like, this is what happens. But just on one point, I really would be doing everyone who listens a disservice if I didn't say Stuart Lancaster, Heineken Cup winner, Andy Farrell, Grand Slam winner, Mike Cack, Grand Slam winner, and Graham Rowntree, URC winner. Yes, they'll be judged off the 2015 World Cup, but maybe not in this part of the world, which I'm more than happy for.
I hope so. He's an incredible. Stuart Lancaster is an incredible coach. Fascinating to see what happens at Racing 92 over the next couple of years. That's a whole different podcast. Go on.
Yeah, if you're inviting yourself back on just to talk about Stuart Lancaster, I won't say no. Mind go down great among Munster fans, but listen, I won't say no. But we'll just touch on the Six Nations quickly, because kind of like Wales, which went live earlier in the week, it's very hard to read into, just by the nature of it. England lost to Scotland on the opening day, beat Italy, beat Wales, got absolutely trounced by France, and then were well beaten by Ireland. So I'll come back to yourself first, Sam. What do you make of Borthwick's first Six Nations?
No, not much to write home about. Sort of C, maybe a C plus with if you can really look at it through rose tinted glasses. It seems to me a man who's trying to get to grips with a team that he's not had for very long, and that he's a very inexperienced international coach, and he's struggling a little bit, and he's having to learn a huge amount on the job. And I wonder whether or not he's just hoping by hook or by crook that somehow some sort of performance at this World Cup off the back of that gives him something that buys him time, that he doesn't get the sack after this World Cup because they crash out of the group stages. That's it. It just seems as though he's trying to buy himself a little bit of time and work out what he wants, and work out where he wants to be and what he wants to do and what sort of thing he needs. And I don't think we're there. And I think the Six Nations is being replicated now in these warm-up matches. that we're seeing the same sort of game plan, the same sort of precautionary processes, the same way of going about your business on the park. It seems to be the same thing, and we were very frustrated and annoyed in the Six Nations when England were playing like they are. They seem to be doing the same thing. The three halves of rugby against Wales were really quite turgid. And that's where we are. It's not interesting in any shape or form.
Yeah.
And interesting is a key word here. You have to attract people. You have to win. You have to attract people. You have to attract people to the game. We need people attracted to the game, and at the moment England are not attractive.
Yeah, no, that's all very fair, and you could make the case that in the the four halves of rugby against Wales, Wales played the most amount of rugby in it, and okay, maybe the two first halves had an only better than zero amount, but it was predominantly Wales, and that's something that needs to be looked at. James, what do you make of the Six Nations? Can we read too much into it, or where would you stand?
I'd say I definitely don't think England became like a sort of bad team overnight. I think it was like a gradual process because so I remember after the 2021 game against Scotland, where they lost that, I sort of put that down to the Saracens core group, like playing in the Championship and not playing top flight rugby. A bit like when like Anthony Joshua when he fights like months later and then expects to win after like nothing. So I sort of put it down to that. So I think we definitely saw some warning signs over time. I think this Six Nations was mixed, but I think like the France game, I was sort of hoping that would be like the catalyst, and I think it was good in the last game how they figured out moves that Ireland had used previously, because I noticed Ireland's try against France when Keenan scored that first try. Ireland tried to set that move up again, and then England stopped that, and then Keith Dell's try in 2021. Ireland set up trying to move again, and again that was stopped. So I can see them learning, but I think it was mixed overall. Yeah,
It wasn't too great, and the weird situation that we're in now is Steve Borthwick has played, and England have played 2 of their 4 warm-up games, but their squad has already been named, and some people are saying that's a good decision. Some people are saying they don't really have a say in it. It's a commercial thing, But the reality is Steve Borthwick changed the squad more than you change your clothes over the last couple of weeks. Just because we're a bit tight on time. Sam, do you want to run us through just your thoughts on the squad in general? And we'll come back and come to your thoughts on the Owen Farrell and Van Borthwick situations, but just the squad in general.
Yeah, squad in general. I mean, it certainly does have the potential to be a good team. There are enough good players in there. I know you didn't want me to talk about the Owen Farrell situation, but it kind of links in with what happens with Owen Farrell. The Owen Farrell England team has a very different vibe to it than the Courtney Lawes England team, and it will be very interesting to see whether or not Owen Farrell is taken. Obviously, we're all working out how long the ban will be. We're pretty sure he will get a ban. How long that will be, if England will take him. And so, I think it's very much there. But there are I would say there are very, very, I was going to say world-class players. Get people atting me on Twitter suggesting that. But, there are some very, very good players like Ben Earl, like Tom Curry. I really like what George Martin does, and I think he has a huge future in the sport. I think in the forwards there's definitely got some potential, and in the backs, again, if what's not happened recently, or what we've not seen, is a license to play, and we haven't had that from England. And if there is a potential to change that, or if that does happen, if a change does happen, and there is a bit more license to play, there are absolutely people who can, do some damage. Max Malins is a wonderful footballer. Henry Arundel, we all know about Henry Arundel. He played on Saturday. And I'm not sure whether he touched the ball. I can't remember whether or not he touched the ball. What's the point?
Twice, I believe.
Twice.
That's nothing, really.
Christian Cullen was arguably the greatest rugby player that's ever lived. But if he didn't get the ball, he would never have been. You've got to get the ball into the hands of these players. And, Joe Marchant's he's got amazing feet. I think the potential is there. I don't think it's potential to win the thing, but I think there's a potential there to make a very good showing of what England could do. But that very much revolves around Owen Farrell.
Yeah, no, that's. Listen, I'm of the opinion that Owen Farrell is England's best 10 and he's arguably England's best 12. It's not a very popular opinion, mind you, given the stances on Farrell those we've seen over the last couple of days. But he's a very, very good player. And it's funny you mentioned the Arundel and only touching the ball twice the weekend. The last game Ireland played, I'm pretty sure Keith Earls had more touches as a scrum half than Arundel had in the entire game the last day. And that's not the young lad's fault. It's the game plan, I see it with Ulster a lot, and I talk about Ulster rugby on a podcast with them. You can have the best wingers in the world, but only a select few coaches would not get them on the ball if they're going to be at that. And it must be frustrating for fans. It really does. And James, I was going to ask you about the backs anyway, so I might just jump into it here. Like, what's your thoughts on this backline core as a whole, and the fact that the rugby England playing have not been great, but really there's probably better players than what their attack suggests.
I think they've got the talent. It's just not used in the right way. Yeah. So like with Ireland, I noticed that they sort of like work hard to be lazy, if you know what I mean, because they've already got the pod set up, and they go back like the other way, whereas like England, and the pod's like, and the pod of forwards is running around the corner, that's like, and they're like using more effort, because I think a large part of England's dominance used to be through their forward pack as well. When they use that tactic of like bash, and then but like now, I don't think their front five isn't as dominant. It's not as dominant as it used to be. So the backs don't have that platform, and then they're like, they seem to like kick after like one or two phases. So I think there's a bit too much kicking going on at the moment. And when they're handling errors, like I don't think you're never going to get rewards when you're making 15 or 16 handling errors in the game. It's as they say, go back to basics. I might do the basics well, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I seen Sam was shaking his head when you mentioned that, and there was a lot of people. It doesn't matter if they were emotionally invested in the first game in Cardiff. There was knock-ons left, right, and centre. Like, it was just not of the right standard. But Sam, seeing as you did a piece on the Owen Farrell situation, I might just get your thoughts on it real quickly, because like, they're coming into their biggest warm-up game against Grand Slam champions. We're number one team Ireland. They're going to lose Jack van Borthwick, their starting scrum half anyways. They're going to be losing Owen Farrell, their captain, and out half. I think it's a scrum half on Portland is, out half Farrell is. Like that's you talk about cohesion with Ireland, France, South Africa. This is the exact opposite. This is Teflon. You know,
it's going to be. There will be hundreds of thousands of England fans watching that game from behind their sofa. There's no two ways about it. It could be very, very damaging. And the only hope that you have is that this week, with the news confirmed that JVP and Farrell are out, that there has to be an about turn. There has to be some sort of phoenix being born out of these flames in some shape or form. That somehow someone goes in. Now, there's no time to really do much. I really enjoy the inclusion of Alex Mitchell. I think that's very good, but he's. My worry is he's on a hiding to nothing, because to a certain extent he's going to be thrown in, you assume, against Ireland, unless Youngs and Kerr take that one, and Mitchell is given a bit more time, and lucky for him he's got Fiji to look forward to beat him up. The Owen Farrell situation is an interesting one. I'm fortunate enough to know people who have been in and around the England squads and are currently involved in England squads. The situation with Owen Farrell is that he brings a certain something as far as mindset is concerned. And this really, really clicked with me. And when I watch England play, it really makes sense to me that he scares the living daylights out of most people. And that's not a great place to play rugby when you're really, really scared and you're really, really worried about what someone's going to say if you bugger up. And he looks furious at the moment. He looks angry. He looks as though the world is on his shoulders. He looks frustrated. He looks as though he's about to burst. And lo and behold, he did. And I wrote in my piece, when the pressure builds, it always escapes from your weak spot. And what is Owen Farrell's weak spot? Not bending at the waist in a tackle when someone runs at him straight on. And we saw it. Yeah. And I think it's frustration. I think he's been frustrated with the way that England have been playing, that he hasn't been able to do what he wanted to do. He had an amazing season. He is a world-class player, amazing season with Saracens, incredible season, played brilliant rugby. Played amazingly interesting, fantastic, attractive rugby Saracens this season. They won. And he's not got that in England for whatever reason. It's not the same in England. He's very, very frustrated. And I wonder whether or not just the player, the skill set that you're losing with Owen Farrell is big and it's massive, but it will give other people an opportunity. George Ford is a really, really good player. He's a really, really good player, George Ford. I think we've because Marcus Smith came along when he did, we've kind of lost sight of the fact that George Ford is a really, really good player and could do really, really good things for England at this World Cup if he's given the chance. He really, really could. James makes the point about ball and this type of ball that a backline will get if England don't get parity up front. That is a worry. That is a concern. That's a genuinely very good point. But I think Owen Farrell, England losing Owen Farrell and Laws taking over the captaincy will bring a very different vibe. And I just wonder whether or not people will get less worried or less anxious or less scared, and actually you won't get passes fired like they were on Saturday with so little touch and feel, because everyone is so full of tension and everyone is so desperate to make this work. Everyone knows artistry is not created when you are full of tension. It's something you do when you are loose and you are relaxed and playing the violin, singing a song. You don't get artistry happening when you're tense. And England looked tense. And I wonder how much of that comes from Owen Farrell screaming and shouting and bellowing like he does, and like we know he is, because he's so keen on trying to deliver what he needs to deliver. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's what I get. And I wonder what will happen. It'd be very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's a very fair point. Now, personally, the Maro Itoje jumping around celebrating everything like he won the World Cup, that would piss me off more than Owen Farrell screaming at me, to be honest. But that's just me. And I'm a Munster fan who's lost to Saracens many times. So you can rub a bit of bias on that there. But very good point all the same. It's good to get that kind of insight, like, because whether he's, someone said George Ford is the hipster's choice. Owen Farrell at this stage is kind of the pantomime villain this week. Regardless, he's still a very good rugby player, and England probably still need him if they're going to have any chance. But
crucially, they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice now. He's created a situation where there is no choice, and maybe that has done England a massive favour. In the football a few years ago, there was, I'm showing my age here, many years ago, there was this big discussion about Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard, wasn't there? Just so many. The choice is the choice. Play them together. It was a similar sort of this situation with Ford and Farrell, and where you put them. Do you put them both on the same pitch? Well, now Farrell has created a situation, probably not through any design, but he's created a situation where there is now no choice. I mean, and I said in my piece, England fans maybe hope for a long ban, because the worst news would be it's a 3-match ban. Because then you've got a 4-match ban. You've got Farrell.
The whole pool stages, clearly.
He halfway. I don't know. I think. For me, in my opinion, James might disagree with me. You might disagree with me. In my opinion, I genuinely think one of the best things that could happen is that Owen Farrell doesn't go to the World Cup, because then we'll find out a bit more.
I should put it in here. This will go up after the hearing and after the announcement. So the educated guess is that he will get 4 to 5 games. And if that happens, then it's a Steve Borthwick decision. It's important that we do stress that, because a lot of people will be listening to this on Thursday or on Friday. So, James, you want to jump in there first?
Oh, yeah. I thought, Sam, you made a great point about like people maybe being a bit scared of Owen. I think 4 years ago it was similar with Ireland, and like people fearing Johnny Sexton. It sounded like a bit, and it kind of made me think that England are sort of where Ireland were 4 years ago, and now Ireland, they're where England were 4 years ago. Because like 4 years ago, Ireland didn't really have too many answers on what they were going to do, because they were found out. And like this year, England are trying to come up with the answers, and everyone's saying that Ireland are one of the favourites, and I'm certainly seeing many of those same parallels. Just both England and Ireland the other way around this time, pretty much. Yeah, definitely.
I suppose sport sometimes repeats itself in that regard, or copies or mimics itself. It's one of the beauties of it. But probably one thing we've never seen before is such a lopsided World Cup draw. And as someone who does follow me on Twitter, and I follow them, as they quipped today, nobody has mentioned the lopsided draw, so we'll be the first to talk about it, because it's never come up. But England are in Pool D, or Pool of Despair, or whatever adjective you want to use to begin with D, alongside Argentina, who scraped to 3rd place in the Rugby Championship, Japan, who have not beaten a Tier 1 nation since they beat Scotland at the last World Cup, Samoa, who appear to be a bit of an unknown quantity, could be on the rise, however, and Chile, who are making their first appearance at the World Cup. So starting with yourself, James, as a pool in general, because obviously England are expected to be at the business end of it in particular, how do you see the pool running out? Who's coming out of that pool for you?
I think England and Argentina. I think Samoa, although they've got some new additions and they're on the rise, I don't think they have enough this time. I think it's more to do with like their systems and how much of a budget they have, because they don't have anywhere near as much as like the tier 1 nations. And I think with Japan, I don't think they're the same as they were 4 years ago. I don't think there's. I don't think England should be too concerned.
They probably
And
should.
Chile, I think. I think they're one to lay down the marker, especially against Argentina, because that'll be the Latin America rivalry. So I don't think they'll win that, but I think they'll at least want to give Argentina a good game. So I think it'll come down to whoever wins out of England and Argentina. I'd say on current form, I'm going to give Argentina. I'm going to say that they're going to top the pool, but I think whoever performs better on the day, we'll top that pool.
You, James, you might be the first person to come on here and not tip their nation to finish top of the pool, because I had Welsh and Australians do the same thing for Pool C, and the Scot. Well, to be fair, the Scots said they'll beat Ireland, South Africa, and lose to Romania and Tonga, but that's an entirely different kettle of fish. And Sam,
good.
what way do you see this intriguing but also potentially slugfest pool going? And I don't want to be too disrespectful, but if we're being honest, like it doesn't look like it's going to be the greatest matchups on paper, but surely England won't be dumped out into pool stages again.
It's all about Samoa. It's all about Samoa. I mean, I don't think Japan, as James said, they don't represent the threat that they were 4 years ago, which is very, very fortunate for England, because they're exactly the type of team that could have undone England in their current guise. I mean, I can only make the decisions on what I have seen of England up to this point. Unless things change, unless some sort of book is thrown out the window and they start again and they do something drastically different, I think they're going to struggle against Argentina. They're going to really struggle against Samoa. They are going to have to play the second string against Chile, who will be incredibly keen to show what what it means to them to be on the world stage. I think England have their work cut out. And if England were playing Samoa tomorrow, it's Samoa. You have to fancy Samoa. You have to fancy Samoa, because England have not, unless there's some amazing game of poker type bluffing going on by Steve Borthwick, who has not shown any sort of attacking hand at the moment. How will England score enough points to put away a rambunctious Samoan side, who are getting drip fed more and more attacking quality back into their setup, with this relaxation on playing for two teams. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. Like James, I think Argentina will win the group. It all comes down to that match against Samoa. Do you know when that is? Have you got the list in front of you? When do England play Samoa?
I do. If you just hold on 2 seconds.
Go on, James.
I think it's the 7th of October.
Against Samoa.
So what?
7th of October, last pool game. With Wales, Georgia, and Ireland, Scotland either side of it.
That was a mic drop, wasn't it? When we just found out this the last pool game. That's it, isn't it? I mean, goodness.
Well, you can book in the couches or the sofas there, because that's going to be one hell of a day of rugby.
Well, I tell you a couple of things I found out today. You can make as many changes as you want to your Rugby World Cup squad up until August the 28th. So that's going to be really interesting over the next couple of weekends. How England shape up on August the 28th as opposed to right now. There are a lot of players who aren't in the squad right now who will be, especially that Fiji game. Goodness me, they're going to play against Ireland and then they're going to play against Fiji. I mean, there could be genuinely, there could be 6 or 7 players. We've already had 1 or 2. There could be another 6 or 7 players who do not play in the Rugby World Cup.
And four test games in a row is a huge risk. I know they had a weak team out against Wales. The first day was heavily rotated, no players from the final of the Premiership.
Yeah.
And they had slight rotation the last day as well. There'll probably be a bit more rotation against Ireland. But it's still 4 test matches in a row. And I understand you need that for, say, to win a World Cup. But
Steve Borthwick needs it. You see, this is the problem we find ourselves in. Steve Borthwick needs it, you know, because he hasn't had a lot of time with this team. He still hasn't really seen players play to the potential that he thinks that they can play to. So he needs games. But goodness me, what a couple. I mean, if you were handpicking a couple of games for England to have, Ireland, then Fiji, because of the different threats that those 2 teams will present, is the stuff of nightmares.
And then 2 weeks later, it's Argentina in the opening game.
Well, by then, who knows who'll be playing?
Well, there's that side of things. There's also who knows where the fear factor will be as well, because it's I can feel it dropping from over here. I take it neither are going to say England to get to a semi-final, so I'll kind of go to the other half of that question, depending on, I always vary it depending on your answers. What constitutes a successful tournament now for England? And I understand it's that can be tough to say before we even get to France, but I'll start with yourself, Sam. What's a successful tournament?
Well, the bizarre situation we find ourselves in is that England could make the semi-final. I mean, that's what's so bizarre about it. By some strange run of events in a rugby match, England could make it to the quarterfinals. They could win their quarterfinal against Wales or Australia or Fiji. Although that seems difficult in my mind. Anyway, they could win, and they could make the semi-finals, couldn't they? I mean, I'm not making that up. They could make the semi-finals, couldn't they?
No, absolutely, yeah. They could make a final, really. It won't be a lot of fun for the neutral, but
come on.
It's not outside the realms of possibility.
You know what? For me, a good result for England in the Rugby World Cup would be to play some enjoyable, attractive rugby that has the likes of me and James turning around and saying, you know what, I would pay, I was going to say £40 to watch England. I'm not sure it's £40. I think it might be a bit more than that nowadays.
Likely, yeah. I think it might be £40 for a pint in Twickenham at this stage.
James and I would pay a lot of money to go and watch them. That's what I want. And I think, and you know what? And with England where they are at the moment, I think many England fans would just want that to be the case. We want to get back to playing rugby. James might be win focused, but I reckon he might take, even crashing out if your group, if you play some absolutely fantastic rugby and players and teams beat you because they play better rugby, but you play brilliant rugby. I don't know. That for me is it. James, would you disagree?
I think definitely. Prioritize winning and getting out of the group. But I think definitely playing an attractive brand of rugby. I think a good result would be at least a hard fought semi-final against like the likes of against someone from the Pool A or Pool B. Definitely a close semi-final and playing an attractive brand of rugby. And whether they come up with a win, it's possible. I'd say for some reason, I think they'd have quite a good chance against France, and because I think France could potentially, and they could take that possibly for granted a bit, and because they beat England 53-10 in the Six Nations, and it's a home World Cup, whereas England would have no pressure. So I think
That is the
There's like,
thinnest of straws that
yeah,
you're grabbing there, James. I
yeah, true.
really
Yeah,
admire your mindset there. But goodness me, that I don't
yeah,
know. I'm not I hope that's the case. But France, oh, different gravy. I don't think
yeah.
I think yeah, different gravy for me.
But I think the reality is, yeah, a hard fought semi final would be a good result. Yeah, and then go from there.
I just think it's very ambitious. You think England can play nice brand of rugby between now and the end of
Well,
October?
It's
exactly.
unlikely.
Exactly. It's and that's it. And that's going to be the story. That's going to be the story. How do England find themselves? How do England rediscover, the sort of, I mean, can you remember Stuart Lancaster referenced it. Can you remember that Six Nations where they had to win against
2015
yeah,
against France last day, yeah.
against France, and they had to win by 26 points, and they were 20-0 up, and
Something
Pepper in the
like that,
line,
yeah.
and Ireland had, the whole day. It was just
Yeah.
like the greatest day of rugby, the greatest day of rugby. When he talks about it, it for me. I was like, oh yeah, oh, it was like the promised land. It was like Narnia. It was like, oh, wouldn't that be amazing? It wasn't that long ago.
No, it's only 8 years ago, Obviously that year finished differently, but
Yeah,
but then at the same time, you could argue, well, how did England win their World Cup? Which, if they didn't remind you already on ITV during the coverage, they won a World Cup in 03. But they won it with a gnarly pack of forwards, and that's still, and they could have done that in 2019 as well. They had some very good forwards playing very good rugby at the time. It doesn't feel like that's going to be the case
No.
this time around.
No.
Steve Borthwick has gone for the game plan that worked for Leicester, but unfortunately, I think the big difference personally is the reason it worked for Leicester is he had them day in, day out. He could drill it into them. The cohesion thing, it's a hell of a lot easier to get cohesion at club level. And, Mike Prendergast spoke about this with Munster, that, judge us after we've had a run of games, not when we're playing every 2 to 3 weeks. And maybe that's what Borthwick is suffering from.
And Borthwick doesn't have Jasper Wiese and Julia Montoya playing for England.
No, he doesn't. Who were
both
going to the World Cup.
Keystones of that Leicester team that you got playing so well.
Yeah, but then the other side of that argument is, well, you won't have a great club side without some great foreign import signings. So there's that side too. But finally, lads, we will get to predictions. I don't think we see England win the World Cup, but well, a lot of people listening will hope they don't, because we're all Irish fans. We all want to see us go all the way. James, I'll start with yourself. Who do you see winning the World Cup?
I think after the news today, with Intermac and Barry being out, I don't think France they were to be one of my top picks. But I think, and after seeing South Africa's team, I think they're going to be a team that's going to, and they're going to dent one of the contenders. So I think New Zealand or Ireland. Yeah, I hope Ireland, considering I'm half Irish. Yeah,
a lot of people will hopefully be using any last bit of Irish descendancy to root them on. So we hope.
Yeah, I'll say Ireland. Yeah.
Sam, which way do you think? And I will recognize that an awful lot of podcasts before this said France, and now Entomac's out injured, and even I'm thinking about changing that pick. But are you still going to go with?
Yeah, I don't. Hey, incredible player, absolutely incredible player. But Roman Entomac is not the reason why France are a good side. And I think, there are good players who could potentially come in, and with every injury and disappointment of missing a World Cup, there is an opportunity. And we've talked about Mathieu Jalibert, and he has been spoken about for a long time as a really, really, really good player. And I wonder whether or not there is a story in that. I would personally, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on this podcast, I would personally like Ireland to win it. But I wouldn't mind if France won it, and we all enjoyed ourselves. We basked in the wonderment of French rugby. I would have no problem with that. Ireland, should win it because of everything that they have done over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. That's why I want them to win it, because of where they've come from and what they've done, and the work done in the provinces, and the work done by Andy Farrell and Mike Catt and the team to get Ireland to where they need to be. And this is an amazing opportunity, and I really hope Ireland take it. So listening to me say that, obviously New Zealand are going to win and spoil the whole party. All right, thanks very much for having me.
That's what a lot of people are thinking as well. I'm going to say one thing, so obviously the other thing is going to happen. But I suppose a lot of these predictions, what I'm getting a sense of is, if France do it, it would be romantic. If Ireland do it, they play the right brand of rugby.
Yeah.
And listen,
That's
if we're excited now, we could have an incredible 2 months if that's what we get, because they're two teams that play an unbelievable brand. And you watch a lot of rugby, I watch a lot of rugby. Like France, Ireland this year, earlier on this year, one of the best games of the decade.
Yeah,
you know, that's what we're talking about.
And the other part of it, and it's a very small and again pathetic part of it, but I want to mention it. One of the best things about the Rugby World Cup coming along is the way that the in the best possible ways, and it's a warning to everyone, the internet joins people up, and you get to speak to people like you get to speak to people across the other side of the world, and you get to speak to rugby fans. And my message would be, I hope the Rugby World Cup, you know, creates really good, healthy discussion. Keep it polite, keep kind to each other online. Don't lose your cool. Just, it's opinions, but those rugby communities, those rugby moments that bring people together and we can all enjoy it. That's also what I'm looking forward to. Every World Cup, the ties are strengthened, you know, and I'm still talking to people online who you know, I was talking to in 2019, I was talking in 2015 and earlier than that. You know, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic sport. It's a fantastic community. Let's not lose our cool with each other over the internet. Let's hope we get some absolutely fantastic rugby, and everyone, you know, continues to look after our incredible community.
Well, we started the show talking about the rugby community. It's a good way to end it, actually, as well. So fair play for drawing it back. There's a bit more podcast hosting experience than myself. Maybe that's what that is.
You've done a brilliant job. Not at all. You've done a brilliant job. Thank you for having me on.
No
really
problem
good.
at all. And thanks very much, lads. It has been a lot of fun. And for those listening at home, I'll have a preview and recap of Ireland's clash with England coming, with previews to follow again next week with more Pool D. We'll have Tier 2 nations, Pacific Island nations, Argentina, Japan. They're all still to come. But thanks at home to everyone for listening, and to the lads for coming on. If you do like to see or hear, please do subscribe. And I have to give a special mention, the Rugby Inheritance Pod with Sam, with Ed Slater. Absolutely do recommend it, and do check it out. I'll have the link for it below. I'll have the link for Sam and James's Twitter pages below as well. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.